Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Moss Norman, and in today's video we're continuing a series on test automation using JUnit 5. In the last video I introduced you to the console launcher and how to use the console launcher to execute JUnit test cases from the command line. And in this video we're going to write a Jenkins pipeline script that uses the console launcher to execute those same JUnit test cases inside of a Jenkins server. We'll also use the JUnit Jenkins plugin to display test results in our pipeline job. In order to follow along with this video, you'll need a Jenkins server with administrative access to that Jenkins server, and that server should have the JUnit Jenkins plugin installed on it. I've made the pipeline script that we write today available in my GitHub repo, and I've added a link to that repo in the video description below. And with that, go ahead and grab a coffee if you don't have one already, and let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is create a pipeline job in our Jenkins instance. So I'm going to go over here and click New Item, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it JUnit Automation and leave it at that. And I'm going to click Pipeline, and I'm going to click OK. And in the pipeline settings, we're going to scroll down to the pipeline section. And in the definition dropdown, we're going to select pipeline script from SCM. So we're going to pull the pipeline script from source code management, in this case GitHub. So you should have the pipeline script hosted in a GitHub repo. And if you don't, that's okay. Like if you want to use just pipeline script directly and paste it in directly, that's okay. But for myself, I'm going to pull the pipeline script from GitHub. So I'm going to select pipeline script from SCM, and I'm going to select Git as my SCM. And then it prompts me for the repository URL. And I've already created a repository for it. So I'm going to go ahead and use that repository link. And let me get the SSH link. Okay. And then I'll select a credential. And again, this is an SSH key pair that I'm selecting here. And you should create one prior to beginning and adding that SSH key pair. If you need help on how to add an SSH key pair for this step, go ahead and check out the video I have on creating a simple Jenkins pipeline script. I'm also going to update the branch. I think my branch name is called main that the Jenkins file is on. And the Jenkins file itself is in the root directory of my project, of my GitHub repo. So the script path is just a Jenkins file. So it's going to look at the root directory of the project to pull the Jenkins file. So besides those settings, I should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And again, if you don't want to mess around with like a GitHub repo, you can certainly just paste the pipeline script that we write directly in here. But it is a best practice of version control pipeline scripts. So I'm going to click save. And now we can go ahead and start writing our pipeline script. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up VS Code here, and you can use whatever editor you prefer. And I'm in the same project that we used in the last video. And I'm going to go ahead and create a Jenkins pipeline script in the root directory of the project workspace. So this is going to be a declarative pipeline script, and the initial line here is just going to be declaring a pipeline. And then we're going to specify that this pipeline can run on any Jenkins agent. So we're going to say agent any. And then we're going to specify the stages in the pipeline, and this is going to show up in the pipeline view in Jenkins with those blocks, right, where the blocks can turn green or red. And just to illustrate what I mean by that, let's take a look at kind of what this should look like when we're completed. So this is the pipeline view that I'm talking about, and each one of these blocks here are pipeline stages, right? So we're going to start defining each one of these stages: build, test, deploy. And if you use the pipeline script directly, if you just paste it directly in, then you won't have this stage. This stage won't exist. Okay, so the first stage that we're going to create is check out the code base. And this is not checking out the Jenkins pipeline script. We've already defined the Jenkins pipeline script in the pipeline settings. This is checking out the code base that contains our JUnit test class and the car class from the previous video. So in this stage, we have a couple of steps. The first step we're going to do is we're going to clean the workspace. We don't have to do this, but if we don't do this, then in the later steps, what we're going to do is we're going to download the console launcher from the web, and this workspace is going to be cached between runs. So we'll have, if we didn't clean the workspace between runs, then we would have to add some, basic logic that if the console launcher was already downloaded into the workspace, then we shouldn't download it. In this case, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to clean up the workspace every time and re-download the console launcher. So I'm going to invoke clean workspace. And then in the next step, I'm going to use the checkout SEM ability. And I'm going to do $class and reference that it's get SEM that we're using. And then I'm going to specify the branches. And remember that the branch that my code resides on, in this case, the code resides on the main branch. Okay. So after specifying the branch, we're going to specify user remote configs. And these are going to include the credentials for my GitHub repo. So the private key to authenticate with my GitHub account. And the credential ID that I have stored for that private key in Jenkins is github-ssh-key. The URL is going to be git@github.com. That's my username. JUnit automation. Okay. And I think I might have a couple of extra. Yeah, I think I had a couple extra brackets there. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Let's just do that real quick. So that should be everything that we need to do in the checkout stage. So the next stage that we're going to write is going to be the build stage. Okay, and let's define some steps inside of the build stage. The first one is, now that we have the project downloaded to the Jenkins workspace, we're going to use the sh utility in the Jenkins pipeline script to run a shell command. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a directory called lib. And once we've made that directory, we're going to cd into it and then download the console launcher from Maven. And if you were using Gradle or Maven, you could, if you had the a dependency defined inside of like a Gradle build file, for instance, it could take care of that for you. In this case, we're using the console launcher, so we're going to just run a wget to download the console launcher from the internet. So once we've made the directory, we're going to cd into the lib directory, and we're going to run wget, and this URL is where the console launcher jar file is stored. Okay. And we're going to reference 1.7.0. Okay. Okay, so that should download the console launcher into the library, into the lib directory in our project workspace. And once we have that, the console launcher downloaded, the next thing that we want to do is we want to navigate to the source directory. And once we're in the source directory, we'll compile and invoke. We'll compile the car class and the car test class the same way that we did in the previous video, using the same commands. So Java C, then specify the class path. And the class path is going to be our lib directory to the console launcher. Jar. And then we're going to reference the car test class and the car class and the app class. Okay. And that's really all we need to do to build. So that should compile those classes the same way it did on the command line in the previous video. That should achieve the same thing in this case as well. And remember, if the Jenkins instance in this case is not on the same machine, like this Jenkins instance is running on the same machine that that I was doing that I was running the console launcher locally on in the previous video. So it has the JDK installed. So be sure that this the server that you're running the Jenkins instance on has the JDK available. So that's all we have to do in the build stage. The next stage that we want to create is going to be the testing stage, where we actually invoke the console launcher and run our JUnit 5 test cases. So I'm going to create a test stage, and in the test stage I'm going to define steps. And the first step is going to be using the sh utility and run essentially the same command that we did previously locally in the previous video. So I'm going to first cd into the source directory, and I'm going to invoke java-jar and then reference the JUnit library for the console launcher. And then we're going to pass in the arguments for the console launcher into this command as well. So we're going to specify the class path as the current working directory, as we did in the last video. We're going to select the class, and you could also, one thing that I didn't mention in the last video is you can also scan the class path using an option called scan class path. I believe this is the option. And it will basically search for all test cases within that directory or that path that you specified. In this case, I'm going to still select, since we only have one test class, I'm going to still use the option to select class, and I'm going to say car test, and then I'm also going to specify a reports directory the same as I did locally. All right. Okay, so that should be good. And then let's go ahead and create the next stage. The next stage is going to be the deploy stage. So we're not really deploying in this case, but this is essentially just running. This is just going to run the main driver app class that I showed in the previous video that prints out like the Ferrari 488 print message. So I'm going to define the steps and invoke sh, and we'll cd into the source directory and then run the app class, or the app program, the compiled app program. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and commit this and push it to my GitHub repo, and then I'm going to run the Jenkins pipeline and see if this works. So let's go ahead and do git status. Whoops. Status, and go ahead and I do need to move. So I created that Jenkins file in the source directory. I should have created it in the root directory of the project. So now I just moved it to the root directory of the project. Okay. Okay, I'm going to push that up. Alrighty, and now that it's updated, we should be able to go back to our pipeline, and let's run it and see if the pipeline runs successfully. Okay, so I messed up a couple of things with the URL. Let's go back and update the URL. We need to add a couple of things here. We want to add JUnit platform console standalone, and then the version, and then we specify the actual file name. So to that URL, we want to add JUnit-platform-console-standalone /1.7.0, and then the file name. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that again. And I'm going to move the Jenkins file. Okay, and now that we've pushed that, let's go ahead and navigate back, and we will build it again and see if this actually builds. Okay, so it looks like it did actually download the console launcher, and it's navigated to the source directory after downloading the console launcher, successfully compiled, and then it during the testing, it invoked the console launcher and executed the test methods that we ran in the last video using the console launcher locally on the command line. So it ran test 1 and test 2, and we get the report out to the console output. So both tests passed successfully. And then the final, the deploy stage, we had the app class run, and that just prints out to the screen, congratulations on your new Ferrari 488. So the pipeline succeeded, and let's take a look at the pipeline view. Okay, so that's the full pipeline view once we've completed the pipeline script. Now this is really good, and it's nice to have this capability to run the JUnit test cases on the Jenkins server, but the step following the automation of test execution is reporting on test execution results. Okay, and the first step towards that is using the JUnit Jenkins plugin, which allows you to display JUnit test results in this pipeline view. And it's very simple. As long as you have the JUnit plugin, I'll go ahead and show what that JUnit plugin looks like in Manage Jenkins. So if I look at Manage Plugins and I look at Installed, we have the JUnit plugin right here. Okay. And the ID is just JUnit. So if you search in the plugin manager for JUnit, it should pop up, and you should be able to if it's not already installed on your Jenkins instance, you should be able to install it pretty easily. So how do we utilize JUnit when we're writing a pipeline, the JUnit plugin when we're writing a pipeline script? Well, it's pretty straightforward, and what we're going to do is we're going to report out as the last step in testing. We're going to report out JUnit. So to invoke the JUnit plugin in the pipeline, all we have to do is use JUnit, and then what we're going to do is specify the location of the reports, where the reports are located. So they're in source reports and then star-Jupyter. So any Jupyter reports, we would like the Jenkins plugin to consume and display those inside of our pipeline job. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that to our Jenkins pipeline and rerun. I'm going to go ahead and move this back. I don't know why it keeps moving back and forth. I guess VS Code just doesn't update the file location. Okay, go ahead and push that. And once it's pushed, let's go ahead and rerun this this pipeline and see if we get reporting, JUnit reporting. Okay, I'm going to refresh, and now you'll see the test result trend graph in the upper right hand corner, and this is the JUnit plugin working. So it tells you, on the x-axis it shows the build number, and on the y-axis it shows the number of test cases that have passed or failed. And personally, I don't really like having the y-axis as the build number. I'd rather see test cases, the results of test cases over time as opposed to over builds. Not to say that it's useless, but it still has some value, but it is, I think, more valuable seeing test case failure and success over time. And this isn't the only thing that the JUnit plugin does. If you go into the actual build itself, you get the JUnit plugin displays the test results at the bottom here, and we can look at the test results in this view and dive into each test, whether it was a success or a failure. And it will give us essentially the same output that it would have on the command line, and we can look at the stack trace as we could on the command line as well if a test case failed. So now we have our JUnit test cases running automatically on a Jenkins server and a pipeline script, and it uses the console launcher. And we even have the pipeline script doing some minimal reporting on the results of those test cases. Now we want to expand that reporting capability to include reporting out to Grafana. So in the next video, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to set up a database or a data source for Grafana and push our test results to that data source and then display it on Grafana. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider throwing a like on it and subscribing to the channel for more videos. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please leave them below in the comments. Thanks for watching.